Hello, I'm Robert Ferguson, and thank you for coming to the site. Please share this video with your friends and your family, your loved ones, because there is a solution that's right in our midst. Dr. Sabine has done an amazing job. She has worked her butt off throughout this entire pandemic and has discovered something that can help everybody. Her information needs to be put in front of all authorities. Joe Rogan, where are you, man? We need your platform. We need the platform of people who care and they want the truth. Let's celebrate the truth. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that when we upload additional information, you will be notified. I appreciate you. I thank you. Again, I'm Robert Ferguson, America's Fat Loss Coach. Let's get to it.
People that are exposed to people with COVID, yet in the same household, didn't catch COVID because their immunity was so much stronger in the gut compared to others that caught COVID.
Man, can you say that one more? I mean, really?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to re-say it. I'm going to re-say
Say that one more time.
People that catch COVID have a imbalance in their gut and low diversity compared to people who are exposed to COVID patients and never got COVID.
Still, many people are hearing microbiome for the first time.
Yes.
But you definitely see it out there on the magazines. So
Yes.
thinking of like a first grade class, how would you describe the microbiome?
Are we allowed to say the word here?
Yes.
Yeah, so to a third grade class, I would say it's your shit in the toilet. That's it. That's what it is. Because that's what the microbiome is. It's all those microbes that you see in the toilet when you have a bowel movement is the microbiome.
Welcome to The Healthy Truth. This is Robert Ferguson, and I am very excited and delighted to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, Dr. Sabine Hazan. I just want to jump right into it because you are amazing.
Thank you.
I call you the queen of the microbiome.
Okay,
So-
perfect. Because you know, the queen of SH.T
right.
is actually trademarked to me. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew who was starting this whole thing.
Okay, well, I'm telling you right now, get the book while you can because they're going to be out. Like, it's going to always be on back order. Let's start with, you're a gastroenterologist.
Yes.
So share a little bit about your background. And
Sure.
then my first question is going to be, what is the microbiome for those who aren't familiar with it?
Sure. So, so I started as a gastroenterologist. And after doing a lot of colonoscopies and private practice, I kind of it wasn't satisfying for me. I wanted to understand life, understand research. I was always into the cutting edge medicine. So every time there was a new device in GI, I would be the first one getting it. And when patients would come to me and the medications in the pharmacies weren't working for them, the trend, the guidelines was not working, I would go to the clinical trial site route to basically find clinical trials for them to embark them. And so I started doing a lot of clinical trials, and that seemed to be more exciting to me. I was always known as the queen of C. diff before the queen of this. And C. diff was a bacteria that people get from having, taking antibiotics. And when clinical trials wasn't working for those patients, I would do fecal transplant, which is the process of taking stools from a healthy donor, implanting it in unhealthy, and reaching a cure. In other words, the patient would feel a lot better and didn't need any more medications. And somewhere along the line, I kept doing the clinical trial route because with pharmaceutical companies and doing, one product after another, because it was definitely cleaner than doing fecal transplant and cheaper in a way because I didn't have to, find a donor, look, test a donor for all these microbes, test the stools, etc., and do the procedure. All that is expensive. So when fecal material in a capsule came as a clinical trial, one could say I went a little bit rogue and said, we're in the SH.T business and we don't even know what we're doing. That's a little bit too far for me. And so basically, I went the path of creating a company, a genetic sequencing lab. I hired the scientist behind the BRCA gene. to basically develop a pipeline for me so I could have a valid, verified, and reproducible assay. So when I test my stools today in a month, it's still me. It's still my microbiome. Except if I took some antibiotics, I would know what changed in my microbiome. So that was basically the path. And, through that, discovered a lot of power in the gut microbiome. And that's the reason to write the book, really.
Well, the book is awesome, and
Thank
everybody
you.
get the book.
Thank you.
Still, many people are hearing microbiome for the first time.
Yes.
But you definitely see it out there on the magazines. So
Yes.
thinking of like a first grade class, how would you describe the microbiome?
Are we allowed to say the word here?
Yes.
Yeah. So to a third grade class, I would say it's your shit in the toilet. That's it. That's what it is. Because that's what the microbiome is. It's all those microbes that you see in the toilet when you have a bowel movement is the microbiome. And that's the gut microbiome. But it's also a little bit more than that. It's microbes all around us,
Right.
In the air, viruses, bacteria, in our food, in the earth, everywhere is microbes. And so we are constantly surrounded by microbes. I joke with my husband because I always say, honey, you need to eat your yogurt. It's got some good microbes in there. He's like, what? I'm eating microbes? And he's like, he doesn't, because you start thinking about what you're eating, right? But the reality is that's what we're doing, right? When we eat kombucha, when we drink kombucha, we're eating fermented products of a bacteria,
Right.
beer, wine, all that. So it's just an accumulation of microbes, and it's in the world of the gut microbiome, it's all about the balance. It's all about the good, the bad, and keeping it equal. And so when you don't keep it equal and you have low good and high bad, viruses penetrate because there's an opening. You just open the door to the colon for viruses to penetrate, go to the brain, go to the lung. That's why we have the gut-lung access pathway, gut-brain access pathway. All that is very important.
Now, do you believe, right, before we kind of dig in there, that in the future, everything is going to be about the gut?
100%.
When you go to a doctor,
Yes.
that's one of the first things they're going to do is look at the health of your microbiome.
I think when you're born, people are going to start testing their microbiome and then having that formula that is your microbiome and then checking what happened. Why is my kid now autistic? What changed from when he was born and speaking? That's going to be the future.
Wow.
And so we're creating the future. We're writing cable, essentially.
And it's constant, right? Because you're like every week or every month, you're learning and seeing new things with the microbiome.
Every day for me is like Christmas. Every day I'm discovering something, and it's just fascinating. Bugs that we have no idea what their names are even. So when you look at the microbiome, we only identify about 1% of the microbiome. There's still 99%. Well, there's 97% that we don't even know we don't know, right? I mean, it's just kind of like the gray zone of the unknown. It's the abyss. And if you look at kids, especially with autism, now some kids you can identify bacteria like the sulfovibrio that Dr. Feingold, Sidney Feingold was a big physician, infectious disease that wrote the book on anaerobic bacteria of the gut. And basically, when he would analyze stools of patients with autism, he would notice the sulfovibrio, which is a type of bacteria, or Clostridium perfringens. So in some kids with autism, you can pick it up, right? You can find, oh, look at this. They have a high relative abundance of the sulfovibrio or Clostridium perfringens. But in other kids, it's actually in that gray zone. That's where that alteration is happening in the microbiome. And that's why we hope that when we correct the microbiome, change it with fecal transplant, that we restore, we get rid of the bad stuff and restore a normal balance. And that's the whole principle behind fecal transplant. That's what I'm actually doing. So I did my first kid about a month and a half ago. So it's a 19-year-old boy who couldn't sleep and he was banging his face and almost breaking his teeth. And we did fecal transplant. He tolerated it well. It's still too early to tell, but he's sleeping better. He is not aggressive. He's listening to the teacher. And he said mama for the first time. So It was amazing for the mom. She was very happy. They're picking up on things that are happening because it's a long process to see the changes. And we have to keep doing it, right? It's not just a one-time, fecal transplant. You have to keep restoring constantly because there's always these bad microbes that are invading. And so you got to restore the good stuff. So, hopefully with this kid, we'll have some improvement. Obviously the best cases are done younger. And that's what Dr. Adams showed with his data when he showed 50% improvement of neurological symptoms post-fecal transplant in kids with autism. So 50% of them improved. What I want to understand better is why 50% improve and why some don't.
Right.
Is it because maybe some kids are just not a gut dysbiosis? Maybe they have a brain problem as the primary, right? Because we certainly see these kids that have a complete diverse gut. We don't really identify any microbes in them. And you wonder if maybe the brain is the primary. And at that point, I'm working with Sheldon Jordan from USC and UCLA, who is basically an interventional neurologist who basically is helping me with the testing of these kids and helping with the brain function and trying different products to help them. So we're hoping to have major solutions for these kids because, somebody needs to pay attention.
Wow. Well, so let's talk about, because there's people sitting at home going, okay, dysbiosis and, diversity,
yes.
right? So explain the importance of diversity when it comes
yes.
to the microbiome,
yes.
because obviously that's a big part of how you can have
yes.
a healthy microbiome.
Yes. So diversity equals health. So a lot of microbes in your gut, a lot of Clostridium, a lot of Ruminococcus, a lot of, different phylums, even like 4 phylums, even 5 phylums is amazing because you've got a lot of diversity, right? And it's kind of, there's an episode, I think it was on The Simpsons, and he showed this door and he said, this is your bowels and all these microbes are stuck. Nothing enters the door if there's all these diverse microbes, right? It's the same kind of thing. If you have a diverse colon, nothing penetrates. If you've got diversity in your microbes, nothing penetrates because it's rock solid. It's your wall, it's your barrier, right, for viruses to penetrate. When you lose the diversity, and how do you lose diversity? You lose diversity with antibiotics, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So you're taking antibiotics for that ear infection. Well, you needed it for the ear infection, but the problem is it's also killing. So it's killing that ear infection, but it's also killing your good bacteria. And so your good bacteria is essentially down, bad stuff goes up, and then again, imbalance. And things penetrate, viruses. And so it's not unusual to hear, well, my kid was on antibiotics, and then all of a sudden, 9 years later, develops celiac sprue.
Right.
Or my kid was on antibiotics all these years, and then all of a sudden developed a neurological problem or autoimmune process. All these things, action leads to a reaction. And then the microbiome, I always compare the microbiome to a transmission of a car. If you look at a transmission of a car, and you break it down, it's 880 pieces. Same thing, that log in the toilet is trillions and trillions of microbes. So if you have a group of microbes that are broken, are you gonna, same as the transmission, if you have one piece that's broken, you can fix that one piece, but the problem is you're gonna break 5 other pieces. Eventually, you're gonna just need to replace a whole transmission. Now, it's the same kind of process. If you lose the diversity and you no longer have that solid bowel movement that you were having, then problems start occurring, neurological problems. And in fact, when you ask questions to patients that have MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, always starts with the gut. I wasn't feeling great. I had some gas. I was constipated. I had some heartburn. I was gassy. Always starts with the gut. And so one has to wonder if maybe, yes, like Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. And therefore, we got to pay attention to the gut.
Okay. So when we talk about diversity and things that
yes.
people can do,
yes,
that would be eating a variety of foods.
Yes. Variety of colors.
variety of colors,
in vegetables. Yes.
you know, drinking plenty of water,
Yes.
and bringing that up when COVID broke out.
Yes.
I did quite a few TV shows,
Yes.
and I would mention gut microbiome.
Right.
And whenever I could plug your book, I would plug it.
Thank you.
But everybody would look at me like, huh?
You know, that's when you're off and out there, nobody wants to hear it, right? Because, oh, he's off. He's not following the masses. But I'm going to tell you, you were absolutely right. Because there is a preprint right now in the medical press that's going where we found a marker of severity for COVID patients, and it's in the microbiome. So we discovered that there's a couple microbes that just disappear with COVID. And whether it's the virus killed them or they were dead to begin with and therefore the virus penetrated, who's to know? It's the chicken or the egg form, pattern. However, we also noticed loss of diversity in those patients. So loss of diversity could be a predisposing factor. So we believe that it's a susceptibility marker for COVID patients because we actually compared it to patients. I don't know if you saw, there's a YouTube video of a farmer, and it's called The Farmer and Dr. Hazen. And in there, the farmer talks about how his wife had COVID, and he took her saliva and put it on his face, and he smeared it, and he asked her to cough on him, and he never developed COVID.
I remember you telling,
Yeah, and I analyzed his stools. Sure enough, he had a diverse microbiome. In fact, one of the best microbiome diversity I've ever seen, and a lot of good bacteria in there. That's why he survived it. I mean, the guy is in the farm playing with manure of the cows. He's in the dirt. He's exposed to the microbiome of life and nature. His wife was a teacher, home, quarantine, with the kids, high stress, so you could see that how she was predisposed to having a gut dysbiosis, or what I like to call, which is an imbalance of the gut, essentially.
Okay, so microbiome is our immune system.
It's our immune system. And we're proving it for the first time with this paper because we're showing how people that are exposed to people with COVID, yet in the same household, didn't catch COVID because their immunity was so much stronger in the gut compared to others that caught COVID.
Man, can you say that one more? I mean, really?
Okay, I'm going to re-say it. I'm going to re-say
Say that one more time.
People that catch COVID have a imbalance in their gut and low diversity compared to people who are exposed to COVID patients and never got COVID.
Okay, so this isn't about me. I've learned so much from you.
Yes.
And I'm thankful for the friendship and the opportunity to exchange and learn from you. But I have been saying that without any science. It's just my gut.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just feels
100%.
like, because I was looking at myself, I traveled 80-something thousand miles during the pandemic.
Right.
I was around all kind of people, interacting.
Right.
And I never got it, but I can tell you every day I was working out.
Right.
I eat the way I eat.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm getting sunshine. I'm doing all these things, and it just never happened.
Right.
It just never happened.
Because you keep yourself in a good balance.
Right.
You're a happy person. You laugh. You don't get yourself too much into the darkness. Right. I mean, I think that's very
stay
important.
Out of the dark.
Yeah, me too. I'm in the light. I mean, I'm always like,
I'm in the light, baby.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wrote a book that has this title. Right. You gotta have, fun in life, because otherwise it's all dark. I could have made it more colorful though. But if it's too dark, everything goes into your gut, and you start, stressing and being anxious. One of the microbes we discovered in there that was super high, we actually found also in people that are very anxious, which is very interesting. That data is going to be coming in the future. But yeah, anxiety does not help people with COVID. And think about it. What have we done with the whole media and the whole stress? We're making people anxious. They're constantly worried about the next door neighbor has COVID. All we've been talking about for 18 months is COVID. Do you remember talking about H1N1?
No.
H1N1 was here for 15 years. 15 years. Nobody talked about it.
Well, and it also makes me think about when this pandemic happened. people didn't move as much.
Right.
They were eating foods that wasn't helping their
Right.
microbiome. You know what I mean?
Right. And also the kids, right? They stayed quarantined, and then all of a sudden they're going out, but they were quarantined, so they're vitamin D deficient, and then they're going back out being vitamin D deficient, so they're predisposed to catching COVID because of the fact that they stayed in a glass bubble for a year, right? So when we see kids having COVID, it's not because kids are predisposed to catching COVID. It's because kids have an amazing microbiome, especially those kids that are delivered by vaginal delivery, right?
Wow. So
And
would
they
that
didn't-
play any role in why so many kids haven't come down with it like adults had?
Yeah, well, if you look at the microbiome of kids, it's way better than the adults. So in fact, the microbe that we discovered in our paper is called bifidobacteria. What is bifidobacteria? It's a microbe that's in your yogurt, in your probiotics, right? The people that had COVID had zero bifidobacteria, severe COVID, zero bifidobacteria. Even kids, there was a kid in there who was 27. I was shocked. She had zero bifidobacteria. Probably took a lot of antibiotics as a kid and therefore killed off all her bifidobacteria. Now, you know, in general, kids have a high bifidobacteria. In fact, the process of aging, if you look at the literature, is high bifidobacteria when you're a kid and then drops down to zero when you're in a nursing home about to die. In fact, patients with cancer, patients in nursing homes, zero bifidobacteria. So why are those people catching COVID? They have zero bifidobacteria, right? So viruses are easily penetrating into their gut. As opposed to kids, 15% microbiome is bifidobacteria, right? 0 to 20. We looked at all our database of kids 0 to 20, and we noticed that 15% of 15% of the microbiome in kids 0 to 20 was bifidobacteria.
Wow.
As opposed to a 70 plus patient with chronic disease, their bifidobacteria, the relative abundance of their bifidobacteria was 1.67%. So 15% in kids, 1.67 in old, 70 plus years old. That's a huge difference. And same thing with, there's kids that have digestive problems, have 3.4% relative abundance of bifidobacteria. That's going to be coming down in another paper that we're publishing.
Wow, you have so many papers. And
we have so many papers, and the problem is it takes me 6 months to write one because I'm so critical of my work. So I always have to ask, you know, I'll call Neil Stolman and I'll call, you know, all these big academics guy, Dr. Tom Barotti. They're all busy. Eamon Quigley, you know, Hussein Boskurt, Colleen Kelly. You know, I bug all my friends and I'm like, could you review? Could you verify? I'm always like, any paper of mine that comes out has been verified before the peer reviews, but processed by my peers, because I'm very sensitive about the criticism. So I always like to know, what am I anticipating in the future? So this paper took so we found COVID-19 in the stools early on, if you remember. And then the whole genome.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the whole genome, like with all its strains, mutations. We can tell you if you have COVID in your stools better than a PCR, nasal PCR. Because we found it in people that were asymptomatic, never had COVID. We found COVID in their stools. And then if you follow these patients, interestingly enough, later on, if they have low bifidobacteria, they end up developing symptoms of COVID and start having COVID. So definitely the stools is where to pay attention to. So we discovered that. That took 6 months to be published. Now this one took 6 months. There's another 4 or 5 papers that are coming that are all written, but they're going through the process of being reviewed before.
So if someone woke up today and they said, you know what, I want to improve my bifidobacteria.
Yes.
Are there things that you would recommend?
Yeah. So what I usually do is I basically, you know, I like my my kefir drinks, my kombucha, my yogurts. You know, Siggy's yogurt has a lot of good.
So just a lot of live bacteria.
Yeah. And I like live bacteria in a product, in a yogurt, because bacteria is anaerobic. It doesn't breathe oxygen. I'm concerned about those bifidobacteria in capsules because I'm concerned about the process that they turn them into capsules, you know, because as soon as the bacteria...
How do they do that without oxygen ever
Well,
hitting
that's it, right? So, and you know, our gut doesn't breathe oxygen. They're anaerobic. It's bacteria that don't breathe oxygen. So the best bacteria that doesn't breathe oxygen is underwater in a drink, right? So that's the best way, in my opinion. So, but you got to be careful because unfortunately there's a lot of drinks out there that you don't know if it's really bifidobacteria. Right. And how did they process it? And there's no supervision and all that. And, there's a paper that is coming out where we're actually showing that the wrong probiotics can actually kill your bifidobacteria. So you could start off with a lot of good bacteria, and then you take the wrong probiotic and it actually kills your own baseline of your bifidobacteria. So you got to be really careful.
I mean, don't you think the FDA has to get involved with
FDA
supplementation?
Has to get involved. I think they have to get involved with vitamins. I think, we've discovered that there's a lot of vitamins over the counter. In fact, that's why I created my own vitamins for my protocols, the zincd.org, because it's vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. I didn't trust the quality of the place that, for example, CVS over the, those over-the-counter vitamin C. And vitamin C is such an important, vitamin, and so is vitamin D, that you got to know who to trust. And I think the FDA needs to start looking into all these products, in my opinion.
I think the FDA has woken up with
all
all of the crazy that we've all experienced.
Yes.
Now, I know you have a recommendation as far as how much vitamin C, vitamin D.
I think it all depends on, if you're a healthy kid and you're in the sun and, probably, a couple gummy bears or a multivitamin is perfectly fine. I think if you're a stressed individual that's working at home and high, stress and your kidney function is fine, probably 2,000 to 3,000 of vitamin C. Definitely vitamin D. I like to measure the levels. So I like to have levels of about 50. If you're at about 30, that's a little bit too low. You're at risk. Anything below 30. In fact, the patients we've treated, and I've treated a lot of patients with COVID, patients I've treated, their vitamin D level was super low. So that's one of the things to pay attention to.
Okay, so vitamin D,
vitamin C. I like the zinc because of the fact that if you do catch the virus, at least it blocks it from going into the cells. And then, of course, your selenium, your magnesium, your calcium, all that is important. But if you have a good diet and you're pretty healthy, just supplement your vitamin D, Well,
like throughout COVID, we did a couple little in-house trials.
Right.
And many of these people were at high risk.
Right.
The morbidities they were dealing with are high.
Right.
And since we did that trial, and Barbara helped me out a lot with that, we had 22 people get off metformin.
Good.
Inside of like 6 months.
Amazing.
14 people off blood pressure medication. And they're all like over 50.
Wow.
50, 60, 70s. And our whole point was, hey, during this pandemic, get as healthy as you can
100%.
Do everything you can do.
See, the healthy truth?
Yes.
This is what it's all about. I'm kind of a bit annoyed with the whole media because we should be pushing people to get on their bikes, to lose weight. Listen, you want to talk about bifidobacteria? Overweight patients have low bifidobacteria. It's just part of their gut dysbiosis, right? We did a study where, and in fact, it's on Progenibiome, so my website has all the publications we've done. There's a study we did where we took mice and we basically gave them a fatty meal, and then we measured their microbiome before and after the fatty meal. And we noticed that after fat was ingested, dysbiosis, imbalance occurred in the microbiome. But not only that, these mice started displaying signs of inflammation. So this was the first paper in a way that correlates obesity and food you're putting in your body with inflammation and microbiome dysbiosis. It's a very important paper because it shows that what you feed your gut ends up causing your problems. And of course, we've seen it. Who are the people that are, having problems in this pandemic? The overweight patients and the population that has probably a gut dysbiosis. So when you see what you thought was a healthy individual and he ends up in the hospital with COVID, maybe he wasn't so healthy. Maybe there was an imbalance in his gut from whatever he took, whether he overdrank alcohol, whether he overdid it on drugs. maybe all that created an imbalance. Maybe he was so stressed and he didn't really show it. So I think all that plays a role when we look at COVID. And so it's important to decrease your stress, to exercise, to be in the sun, to use vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc. All that is important.
Well, you know, it's also interesting you bring that up, because in the beginning, like the first 6-8 months of the pandemic, we had an anecdotal kind of like study where we looked at people who were bodybuilders.
Yes.
People who appeared to look, I mean, they looked amazing on the outside,
Right.
but they had a hell of a time with COVID.
Right.
And I kept thinking dysbiosis. They look good on the outside,
Dysbiosis.
but
Yes.
I know how a lot of them eat. They eat the same thing.
Yes.
And then I remember asking you, I said, hey, can you find me any gastroenterologist that will endorse keto?
Yeah, I know. But you know, it's so funny. The other one is the young ladies that are trying to stay skinny and taking laxatives.
Right.
That's a huge dysbiosis right there.
Oh.
And it's almost impossible, you know, because they come to me with, well, I'm constipated. So they've used laxatives their whole lives. So they've removed a lot of their good microbes that was allowing them to have a regular bowel movement, right? And so even constipation is a dysbiosis, is an imbalance of the gut. So it's almost impossible to correct what you've lost unless you do fecal transplant, but we're not there yet.
Right.
So, you know, so people really need to assess what they're doing. You know, just because you're taking laxatives to stay skinny, maybe it's keeping you skinny for a couple of weeks, but then the problem is long term, you're damaging your gut.
Okay. Now I know, you know, you've shared with me some things off air. Is there anything that you can share in addition to what you've already shared that would be helpful for people? Because, you know, we live in this world where everyone's rushing to the TV to find out what to do.
Right.
And they want to listen to, and I'm talking about like COVID or preventing it, getting vaccinated, not being vaccinated. And I'm not leaning any way, but is there anything that you can share that you're working on that will eventually come out and people can learn from it?
Well, I think, you know, we're looking at the microbiome. We're looking at the microbiome, the effects of medications, vaccines, everything on the microbiome. I think that's going to be important research as we look into it in the future. It cannot come fast enough, unfortunately, because research is slow and we got to make sure everything's done properly. But I think this is important research that needs to be done and needs to be unbiased in a way. And you know, looking at the microbiome is the abyss. It's the holy grail. I think, you know, I'm a big believer of freedom of choice, right to try. I think what's happening in the media is a little bit too, not destructive, but one-sided narrative. And I think, you know, we need to have more discussions. We need to be able to ask questions because you know, ultimately, all of us as scientists have a hypothesis, right? Even me with my bifidobacteria is just a hypothesis, right? I could be wrong. I could be right, but I could be wrong, most likely right. But what about the scientist that says, well, this is a one solution for everybody? Who says he's right? Now, you know, when we do clinical research as doctors on the front line, we have the ability to see the patients, to understand the microbiome and the patient's severity. Remember, these pharmaceutical companies that are bringing these products to market, they hire doctors that they don't really see. They see from their, you know, their golden tower down the data, because at the end of the day, it's like, you know, dollars and cents for them, right? However, you know, that scientist that started this medication may be wrong about this medication, right? And so we have to be objective to allow all scientists to talk and to discuss. And I think one of the problems that I have with this whole pandemic is the one direction narrative, the one person that says the narrative and then everybody follows. There's no other side to the coin. I mean, it's only one-sided coin. Of course, there's another side to the coin. Of course, there's something outside the box. Here, by the way, clinicaltrials.gov, there were, when I started, probably about 4,000 protocols on COVID from China, Japan, Spain, everywhere. And then now it's about 8,000 in America, different clinical trial protocols, right? And out of that, 2 protocols are looked at the microbiome. 2 out of 8,000.
Wow.
One is in China. They're, always ahead of the curve. And then one was my lab in Ventura. Go figure.
Yeah.
Two studies on the microbiome. Don't we think we need to look at the microbiome and the gut bacteria to see who survives COVID and who doesn't? That's the number one reason. Gut immunity is in your gut. That's it. So, when you look at the markers of inflammation, and you look at what bifidobacteria does to your immunity in the gut, you start understanding it better. You start saying, that's the answer. We need to look at the bifidobacteria levels in people. We need to start looking outside the box of how to understand disease better. We have this new technology, which is really forensic medicine. Progenibiome has created an assay that is so amazing that it could tell you today, tomorrow, in a year what your microbiome changes happen. It's still your same microbiome. It doesn't really change much, but it'll change depending on what you did, amount of stress, amount of vitamin C you took, amount of vitamin D, etc. So I think because we have that ability and we've looked at multiple diseases as a whole, we're going to be in the future able to say, well, you know what, this disease is this group of microbes, and this disease is this group of microbes, and this is how we alter it. It's back to balance, back to rechecking the relative abundance. Mental illness is a dysbiosis of the gut,
Right.
Crohn's disease is a dysbiosis of the gut. Autism, all these conditions is a gut microbiome issue. And so these microbes need to be understood better, and we need to look at them and we need to pay attention. So looking at only one way is not the right way, because then you've missed the answer, which was right here. And I looked at it because I'm the kind of girl that doesn't follow the masses. Right. I'm here. Like my husband will tell you, like if there's a line, we'll never follow the line. I'm always like, well, I think we should go this way around the mountain. And, you always, get to the top. You could stay in the line of sheep, but you'll never reach the top. You got to find a shortcut to go to the top of the mountain, So this is what I'm doing. I'm outside the box somewhere where nobody is, happy in my little environment of microbes, and I'm discovering all these amazing things about the microbiome.
See, wouldn't it be great instead of them telling me I have to go get tested with the nasal?
Yes.
And they say, hey, go over and see Dr. Sabine, and she's going to check out your microbiome.
Yes.
And see if there's any COVID in there.
Yes.
And then we know, right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
even if you can have it and never have gotten COVID.
Correct.
Right?
And okay. We're going to start developing, because I thought for sure by now somebody would have developed a rectal swab, but we're going to develop a rectal swab, which basically is going to test people for COVID.
And would that
and
be
I
something
think that's
people
going
could
to
mail in?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
we're going to hope to.
You say
do.
rectal swab, my mind went to the worst place.
Yes, I know. You mail it. It's
Is that a guy
but
thing?
yeah, but by the way, that's what they do in China now. China, I don't know if you saw, anal swabs. It's no longer up here. They're looking at the gut. They're paying attention to the gut. Because you could be negative here and positive in the gut. And you'll never know until it comes out. Because and by the way, when you go to the restrooms, the public restroom is your biggest risk factor because the virus becomes airborne after a bowel movement. So you got to think that potentially the gut virus is not dead, but maybe still alive.
So instead of wearing a mask, you better get a
helmet. I'm telling you, the Jetsons. We're in the area of the Jetsons. We're going to put a helmet on, even when we go to the airplanes. I think that's
big
better.
old diaper.
Well, I don't know about a diaper. I think you can still smell it. Listen, the mask, you could smell it, okay? So I think, I'm not so sure about those masks. But the thing is, what people don't realize is also the virus can penetrate through the eyes, the skin, topical. When you put something on your skin, it gets absorbed in the blood vessels and eventually goes into your gut. So
Wow.
Yeah.
That opens up a whole bunch of
Oh,
challenges.
there's so many bacteria in your gut that you would be shocked.
Well, since you do work with,
Botulinum toxin is in your gut. So when I looked at my bacteria and I saw botulinum toxin, I'm like, you mean I can culture botulinum toxin and do Botox on my face? Amazing. I'm there. No, I'm just kidding.
okay, well, for clarity, because someone will hear you talk about bifidobacteria,
Yes.
and they'll run to CVS and buy a probiotic.
Yes.
It says bifidobacteria
Yes.
all over it.
Yes. Don't do that.
So what you're saying is you can get it through food?
Foods. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I love your show because, and I follow you on Facebook because you always have these cool recipes. Salmon, people don't realize vitamin D,
Yeah.
huge
very
in
high in it.
salmon. And so you always remind me to eat my salmon.
It's funny because I ate a lot of salmon during pandemic.
Yeah, and that's why your vitamin D level is
I
probably
remember
amazing.
going, man, I am eating salmon
Yeah.
because I was in the house all the time. So I was
And the right
breakfast-
salmon too. Where do you buy your salmon?
I go to Sprouts.
Yeah.
They have a wild sockeye.
Yeah, nice.
And now we have another local store called Aldi,
Nice.
and they have a wild option.
Nice.
So I'm real big on that.
I'm big on the wild too.
Yeah. And I
So-
like the taste. I like the wild sockeye. It actually tastes good. And every once in a while, my kids want the farm because they've tasted it.
Yes, yes,
And,
yes.
you know,
It's
it tastes pretty good.
yes. The farm is pretty good, but you wonder about.
Well, I figure I'll
manipulation.
eat that when I go to a restaurant,
Right.
right? Because they don't always have,
Right.
wild sockeye at the restaurant.
But yeah, foods, salmon, fermented foods is very good. Fermented cheese, very good. Raw cheese, raw milk, all that is really good for you.
Okay.
Kombucha.
So, you guys get the book, and I know there's many to come. And you
Yes.
are so humble. I just want to say it out loud.
Thank you.
To make time to come in and
Thank
share
you.
with us and our platform. I'm just so thankful, and I look forward to going out of my way to reach out to Joe Rogan because
Ooh,
I think you will be the best guest. You two will have a blast.
we'll have fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so many people
definitely.
will be inspired to want to be healthier.
Good.
Because
I
right now,
hope so.
they're still not talking about it.
No, nobody's talking, and it's really sad that even the whole disaster of ivermectin, talking about it like a horse dewormer. First of all, let's call it what it is. It's a fermented product of a bacteria called Streptomyces. That's it. It's a bacteria product. Why are we going all out on that? And it's a bacteria in the soil of Japan, by the way. So are we going to start looking into our yogurts? Are we going to start looking into our cheese? There's bacteria everywhere. So I think they went a little bit too off on that, calling it a horse dewormer. First of all, animals have the same medications as humans. It's just the way it is. Fecal transplant actually started in animals. They started doing fecal transplants on horses. And then a physician said, we did it. Veterinarians were doing it on horses. Maybe we should try it on humans. And that's when they started seeing that it improved Clostridium difficile. So, I think the way the narrative has gone is a little bit too much, I think.
Okay. Now, can a person go to your website and contact your company
Yes.
to find out what their microbiome is?
Yeah, so we do it as a research. So we give
Okay.
them a consent. We basically put everything on the consent, so they have to read the consent carefully. And then they sign, we co-sign. And then we send them a kit, which is basically a little tube. We are not a commercial lab. We're strictly research. So they get time with me to understand what I see. However, I'm very careful to tell them that this is the beginning. So as we get more information, we keep them in the loop. Kind of like 23andMe of the gut is what we're doing.
Okay.
We're trying to, decipher all these microbes and understand them a little bit better. But it's coming. It's coming. We're definitely seeing a lot. Diversity, being equal to health was definitely our finding. And that was pretty amazing to see that.
Nice.
What's amazing about the microbiome is also, I look at it as a mini universe that guides us, right? So same thing as humanity, right? So you've got your good people, your bad people. If too many bad, then the world is in chaos. Same thing in the microbiome, good bacteria, bad bacteria, chaos in the gut and unhealthy, right? And when you have some people would you'd like a world of like just one type of personality, one race, right?
Right.
That's not good, because that's the end of humanity. I mean, when you look at it comparatively to the microbiome, if you start destroying races, you will lose humanity, because humanity is beautiful because of all those races and is healthy because of all those races together. So I think, to me, the microbiome has so much more meaning and even philosophy behind it. That's amazing.
When you buy this book, you guys, you're contributing back to her research.
Thank you.
I mean, she's not going out to eat because you bought the book.
Yeah, I'm not. I spent so much money on this research already. So yes, that's why we did the book. That's why we even do vitamins. It's just basically to support the research.
Okay,
because we want to help these kids with autism. We want to change the patterns of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. That's what we need.
Well, you are a gift to the world.
Thank you.
And I look forward to continuing to help all of us to help get you in front of all the right people.
Thank you.
We need to hear more of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you for your work. And when you have new updates and when these studies are published, will you please come back again?
For sure, for sure.
All right, you guys. So the website is there. Let's support Dr. Sabine and get the book and tell everybody about this video so they can learn about the queen of the microbiome. We'll be right back.
Thank you. That was awesome.
All right.
Yeah.